Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to tell you about the difficult, impoverished, and struggling days of Huyen and her mother to make a living. They stood silently in front of the hospital checkout counter, still holding the discharge papers and the doctor and Appo's prescription. He carefully placed each sheet of paper on the counter, completing the procedures for Huyen to return home. The medical staff checked the records, calculated the costs, and then announced the amount to be paid. He was momentarily stunned. He reached into his shirt pocket, took out the crumpled bills, and carefully counted the remaining money. He bowed his head, counted again and again, then quietly placed the money on the counter. After completing the procedures, he received the discharge papers and the prescription. Holding the papers in his hand, he sighed deeply. Although his savings were almost exhausted, looking towards the room where Huyen and Micah were waiting, he only wished that the mother and daughter could return home soon and be safe together. Da is sitting by the stove, carefully cooking a steaming pot of porridge. He holds a spoon, gently scooping some of the porridge and bringing it up to taste. But as soon as he touches it, because the porridge is still too hot, he quickly pulls his hand back, softly sighing. Huyen sitting nearby witnesses the scene and Can and Appo's. He helped but smile. Seeing Huyen smile, Da also turns to smile softly. In the small kitchen, the two quietly look at each other, sharing a gentle smile. After days of exhaustion and hardship, that peaceful moment makes the small house feel warmer. In the morning at the hospital, Da just woke up after a long, exhausting night. He hurriedly sat up, walked to the bedside to check on Huyen and Micah. Seeing Huyen still resting, Da let out a gentle sigh of relief and then looked at Micah. At that moment, the girl also just woke up, her eyes still sleepy. Da gently carried Micah out to the hospital corridor, sat her upright on the long bench. He took a small comb, carefully brushed her messy hair, and then gently tied it up. Da and Appo's hands were clumsy but full of care. Micah sat still while he tied her hair, occasionally looking up at Da. Outside the corridor, the early morning sunlight filtered through the window, shining down on the two of them. In the quiet space of the hospital, that moment made Da feel warm inside, as if he was trying to take care of Micah in place of Huyen while she was still weak and tired. Da gently carried Micah back to the hospital room, laying her down beside Huyen. Micah obediently lay close to her mother, her eyes still drowsy. Da pulled the thin blanket back, carefully covering the two of them, then stood quietly, watching Huyen with a worried expression. After a while, the doctor entered the room to check Huyen and Appo's condition. After examining her, the doctor prepared the equipment and carefully searched for a vein on her arm. Da stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, watching each movement of the doctor. When the 4-needle was inserted into the vein, the fluid bag was hung on the stand. The drops of fluid began to flow slowly down the 4-tube. Huyen lay still on the bed, while Micah remained close to her mother. Da sat down beside the bed, silently watching the two of them, hoping Huyen would recover soon. Da left the hospital room, carrying the hospital fee receipt to the payment counter to pay additional money. After completing the procedures, he turned back and took Micah and Appo's hand to go to the hospital cafeteria. Upon arrival, Da ordered a hot bowl of porridge for Huyen. A moment later, the porridge vendor brought out the bowl. Micah politely received it with both hands, carefully holding the steaming bowl. Da stood beside her, took out the money to pay, and gently reminded her to hold it firmly. After buying the porridge, the two of them prepared to return to the hospital room. Outside, it was still raining, and the corridor leading to the ward was wet, making the tiled floor slippery. Fearing that Micah might fall if she walked carelessly, Da bent down and picked her up. Micah obediently wrapped her arms around Da and Appo's neck, while he carried her with one hand and held the bowl of porridge carefully with the other. Da walked slowly along the corridor, avoiding puddles to prevent spilling the porridge and causing her to fall. The rain outside continued to patter, and the cold wind blew through the corridor. De held Micah tightly and took her back to the room. Upon arriving at the hospital room, De gently placed Micah down and took out a bowl of porridge. Seeing her mother lying on the bed, Micah quickly grabbed a spoon, scooped a spoonful of porridge and carefully blew on it to cool. The girl brought the spoon close to her mother and Appo's mouth, wanting to feed Huyen herself. Seeing Micah trying to take care of her mother, De smiled gently and said, "Let me feed your mother, Micah." De gently took the bowl of porridge from Micah and Appo's hands. He scooped each spoonful, blew on it carefully to cool, and then brought it to Huyen and Appo's mouth. Huyen weakly ate each spoonful of porridge, her gentle eyes looking at Micah and Da. Micah sat close beside the bed, attentively watching De feed her mother. The small hospital room became warmer thanks to the simple care shared by the two relatives for Huyen. The doctor entered the hospital room, checked the 4-bag, and gently removed the 4-needle from Huyen and Appo's arm. After taking care of the puncture site, the doctor turned to call Da to the duty room for a discussion. Da hurriedly followed the doctor. When they arrived at the duty room, the doctor sat down, reviewed the records and said, "The patient and Appo's health is now stable, there is nothing to worry about. Today the patient can go home. You just need to sign this discharge paper to complete the discharge procedures." Hearing these words, Da was stunned for a moment, then his face lit up with joy. For the past few days, he had been anxious and worried about Huyen. Now, hearing the doctor say she could return home, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Da picked up the pen, carefully signed the discharge paper. He stood up, bowed his head to thank the doctor, then took the stack of papers and returned to the hospital room. His steps felt much lighter, and a smile of happiness appeared on his face as he thought about Huyen and Micah soon returning to their small house. Upon arriving at the hospital room, Da hurried to the bedside, gently helping Micah sit up. He smiled and said, "Today you and Appo's going home. Come on, Micah, get up and prepare your things to go home." Hearing that, Micah was overjoyed and became more alert, obediently sitting up and packing her belongings. Da turned to the bed, gently helping Huyen sit up. Seeing that Huyen was still weak, he carefully handed her a shirt to wear. Then Da went back to tidy up the items left on the table. He folded the clothes, gathered medicines, documents, and miscellaneous items, placing them into a bag. Everything was neatly arranged so that mother and daughter could leave the hospital. Huyen sat on the bed watching Da busy packing, feeling both relieved and touched. After many days in the hospital, her mother and she were finally about to return to their small home. Da and Huyen stood up, greeting everyone in the hospital room before leaving. Micah obediently held her mother and Appo's hand, while Da carried his bag and discharge papers. The three of them slowly walked out of the hospital room, along the corridor, and headed towards the parking lot. Upon reaching the place, Da took out his motorcycle, checked it over, and then led it outside. He carefully helped Huyen sit on the back, with Micah sitting in front. After ensuring that the mother and daughter were seated properly, Da got on the bike. He turned his head to look at Huyen and gently asked, "Are you sitting securely?" Huyen nodded softly, holding on to Da and Appo's shirt. Da smiled and said, "Let and Appo's go home." The motorcycle gradually rolled out of the hospital yard, carrying Huyen and Micah back to their small house after days of worry. The motorcycle traveled a long distance. By noon, Da looked back and saw Huyen and Micah sitting on the bike, exhausted. He slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road, stopping under a large shady tree. Da turned off the engine, carefully parked the bike, and told the mother and daughter to rest for a while. The three of them sat under the tree, enjoying a bit of cool breeze in the midday heat. Da opened his bag, took out a prepared loaf of bread. He gently tore the bread into pieces, gave a piece to Micah, a piece to Huyen, and kept his own. Micah happily ate her piece of bread. Huyen also ate slowly, piece by piece, while De sat beside her, eating and watching to see if the mother and daughter were tired. Micah, holding a piece of bread in her hand, ran to a corner under the shade of a tree, then sat down to eat. The gentle midday breeze brought a cool feeling that made the girl feel happy and comfortable. It had been a long time since Micah experienced such peaceful moments. On the other side, De and Huyen also sat together, slowly eating their bread. De saw Huyen finish eating, then took a water bottle from his bag, poured a glass and handed it to her. "Drink some water." Huyen took it, nodded softly and sipped small amounts. De sat beside them, watching the mother and daughter, feeling relieved as they both seemed less tired. After resting for a while, the three of them packed up their belongings and stood up. De took the motorcycle out onto the road, and Huyen and Micah took turns getting on the bike. De checked everything again, then started the engine. The bike slowly rolled along the countryside road. The wind blew through, and the trees on both sides swayed in the midday sun. After many days in the hospital, the three finally began to gradually return to their familiar small house. The motorcycle traveled a little further, and then passed through the familiar market area. They looked into the market, then slowed down the bike, and pulled over to the side of the road. "To buy some clams to cook porridge for you." Saying that, De entered the market, bought some fresh clams. He carefully selected the good ones and paid the seller. After paying, De carried the bag of clams back to the bike, placed it in the front bag, and then turned to look at Huyen and Micah. The bike started again. De continued to ride with the mother and daughter along the familiar village road. On both sides, the rows of trees and fields gradually receded behind. Huyen sat behind, leaning her head on De and Apo's back. The way home seemed closer today. After the long days in the hospital, the motorcycle slowed down and then stopped in front of the house gate. De turned off the engine, parked the bike neatly, and then got off. He gently helped Huyen into the house, while Micah trotted along beside her. As they reached the porch, the sound of the vehicle and footsteps caught Pippi and Apo's attention. Hearing a familiar person returning, the dog became excited, barking and trying to approach. Its tail wagged non-stop, and its eyes were full of joy. When Huyen saw Pippi, she was moved and sat down beside him. She gently stroked the dog and Apo's fur and softly called, "Pippi, Pippi, are you hungry?" Pippi pressed close to Huyen, happy as if to say that it had been waiting for her to return all these days. Huyen stroked Pippi while smiling, and De stood nearby, feeling relieved as he watched the scene. De gently opened the door and carefully helped Huyen into the house, guiding her to lie down on the bamboo bed. He adjusted the pillow to make her comfortable before standing up. De opened the door wider to let the outside light flood in. The gentle afternoon sunlight shone through the porch, casting a warm golden hue over the small house. After long days at the hospital, returning home made the atmosphere here feel strangely peaceful. De carried the bag of clams he just bought and placed it down by the stove. He took a basin, poured the clams in, and rinsed them thoroughly under the tap. Each clam was carefully picked out, cleaned of sand, and set aside in preparation for cooking porridge. Huyen lay quietly on the bamboo bed, watching De busying himself by the stove. Micah sat beside Pippi outside on the porch, occasionally reaching out to pet the dog. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the door, enveloping the entire house in a peaceful and warm atmosphere after days of hardship. De poured 2 glasses of water and brought them to Huyen and Micah to drink. Seeing that mother and daughter finished drinking, he felt reassured and placed the glasses down, then took a broom and went outside to sweep the yard after days of the house being empty. Micah saw Uncle De busy sweeping the yard, ran over and reached out to take the broom. "Uncle De, let me sweep." De looked at Micah, then smiled and handed her the broom. Micah held the broom with both hands and started sweeping small strokes around the garden. The dry leaves and grass clippings were gathered into piles. De stood beside her, watching Micah work diligently, occasionally bending down to help her gather the leaves. Huyen sat on a bamboo bed, looking outside, and softly smiled when she saw her uncle and niece sweeping the yard together. The gentle afternoon sunlight gradually dimmed, covering the small yard. After many days apart, the house was once again filled with the sounds of people, footsteps, and the simple noises of a peaceful evening. De gently entered the bamboo bed, carefully helping Huyen lie down. Seeing that she was still tired after the long journey, he pulled the pillow closer and softly said, and quote, "Traveling by car is tiring, rest well and sleep peacefully," end quote. Huyen nodded softly and lay still on the bed to rest. De looked at her for a moment before heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner. He took the clam basin he just bought, poured the clams out in front of him, and carefully selected each one. De tapped 2 clams lightly against each other to listen to the shells, keeping the live ones to put into the pot. Then he scooped water into the basin, washed the clams thoroughly, stirred a few times to remove the sand, and let them drain. De placed the pot on the stove, added the clams, and turned on the heat. The flame began to burn beneath the pot, and the warm steam gradually spread around the kitchen. He sat beside it, occasionally glancing into the clam pot, preparing to cook a hot porridge for Huyen after the long tiring days. The afternoon sunlight had faded. In the small house, everything slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm. Micah carried the small bamboo chair out to the front yard and placed it under a shady tree. Pippi saw the girl going outside and waddled after her, always staying close to Micah. The girl entered the garden, admired the blooming flowers, and picked a beautiful one. Micah pinned the flower on her hair, looked back at Pippi and smiled. The girl sat down on the bamboo chair, swinging her legs, and began softly singing a children and Apo's song. Pippi lay right beside her, occasionally lifting her head to look at Micah as if listening. The evening breeze gently blew through the garden, making the leaves sway. Micah and Apo's clear singing voice echoed through the peaceful yard, blending with the sounds of birds and the wind, filling the small house with life after days of silence. De took a few sprigs of fresh herbs, placed them in a small basket, and carried them outside to the water jar to wash thoroughly. He picked each sprig, removed the yellowed leaves, and rinsed them to remove dirt and sand. After washing the herbs, De went back inside to get a bowl and chopsticks, then brought them to the front ditch. He sat down by the water and Apo's edge, rolled up his sleeves, and washed each bowl and pair of chopsticks carefully. The sound of flowing water mingled with the evening birdsong and the wind blowing through the trees. In the garden, Micah was still sitting on a bamboo chair, playing with Pippi. In the kitchen, a pot of clams was boiling vigorously. After a long journey back home, Huyen lay still on the bamboo bed. Her body was still tired from the days of treatment in the hospital, but the feeling of returning to the familiar house gradually made her feel lighter. The evening breeze softly blowing through the trees, and the sound of water from the front ditch trickling in. These familiar sounds made Huyen and Apo's eyes slowly close. Before long, she fell into a peaceful sleep. In the small house, De was quietly busy in the kitchen. Micah was playing outside with Pippi, while Huyen lay on the bamboo bed, sleeping soundly after the long, exhausting days. The gentle late afternoon sunlight filtered through the window frame, casting a peaceful and warm atmosphere over the room. The clam pot on the stove was boiling vigorously, steam rising thickly. De carefully lifted the pot down and used a pair of chopsticks to pick out each clam and place them in a nearby basket. He waited for the clams to cool slightly, then sat down to shell each one, discarding the clam meat into a clean bowl. After shelling the clams, De took the leftover rice from the previous day. He put the rice into a bowl, rinsed it several times and drained it. Then De added the rice to the pot of clam boiling water on the stove, stirred gently, and covered it with a lid. The flame burned steadily. The water began to boil again, and the rice gradually expanded in the fragrant, sweet clam broth. De sat beside, occasionally opening the lid to check, patiently waiting for the porridge to become soft so Huyen could have a hot meal after returning home. Micah was happy to see her mother wake up and hurriedly ran into the house. The girl gently helped Huyen sit up, and then supported her mother step by step to sit on the porch to get some fresh air. Seeing Huyen come out, De also quickly went to get a bamboo chair, placed it in a shady spot, and gently helped Huyen sit down. He looked at her with concern, worried that Huyen was still weak after her days in the hospital. Micah also quickly ran into the house, carried her small bamboo chair outside, and placed it beside her mother. The girl sat close to Huyen, happily looking up at her mother. Outside on the porch, a gentle breeze blew, carrying the cool air from the garden. Huyen sat resting with Micah beside her, while De was still busy taking care of the two of them. That simple moment made the small house feel warmer and more peaceful. Sitting outside on the porch, Huyen suddenly coughed softly. Hearing the cough, De immediately stood up with a worried expression. He hurried inside the house to get a jacket and gently put it on Huyen, pulling it tight to keep her warm. Micah also quickly ran into the house. The girl found a shirt and brought it out to her mother. As she ran to Huyen, Micah said, and quote, "Mom, put on this shirt to stay warm." End quote. Seeing Micah and De busy taking care of her, Huyen smiled softly. De stood beside her, adjusting her jacket, while Micah sat close to her mother, her eyes full of concern. The evening breeze still blew gently, but inside the small house, the care from her uncle and niece made Huyen feel warmer than ever. The porridge pot on the stove is just about to be done, and the aroma of clams and rice spreads throughout the small kitchen. De holds a spoon, scoops a little porridge to taste. But as he brings it to his mouth because the porridge is still too hot, he suddenly pulls back his hand, softly sighing. At that moment, Huyen sitting outside on the porch watching inside the kitchen also sees everything. Seeing De and Appo's clumsy behavior, she can and Appo's help but smile. De turns and catches Huyen and Appo's smile. Seeing her happy, he also gently smiles back. In the gentle afternoon sunlight, the two silently look at each other, sharing a warm smile. Inside the small house, without saying a word, that moment is enough to make the afternoon feel more peaceful and gentle. The sky gradually darkened, and the outside light slowly went out. I took out the oil lamp, carefully lit it, and placed it beside the bed. The gentle yellow glow illuminated the small house in the quiet evening. Then I returned to the kitchen, picked some herbs, and carefully chopped them to prepare the porridge. After everything was ready, I went to Huyen, gently helped her to stand, and guided her inside the house. I helped Huyen sit on the bamboo bed, adjusted the pillow to make her comfortable. The oil lamp beside flickered softly with the gentle breeze, casting light on Huyen's face and the figure of me busy caring for her. The porridge is cooked, and I gently scoop it into a bowl, then place it on a small tray. He takes additional bowls, plates, and spoons, arranging them neatly before carefully carrying the tray into the house and setting it down beside the bamboo bed. I serve the porridge into 3 bowls. One for Micah, one for Huyen, and one for myself. The hot steam rises, carrying the aroma of clams and fresh herbs. I sit down beside Micah, scoop a small spoonful of porridge, and carefully blow on it to cool. He brings the spoonful of porridge to her face, gently feeding her each spoonful. Micah sits obediently, eating quietly while Huyen sits beside, silently watching the two of us. Under the soft yellow oil lamp light, the simple meal in the small house becomes warmer than ever. The 3 of them sat together, slowly eating hot porridge under the gentle yellow oil lamp light. There was no fancy dish, just a simple clam porridge, but after long days in the hospital, that meal made the small house feel unusually warm. After finishing, De cleared the dishes and returned to the bed. Huyen lay down, Micah also lay close to her mother. The girl wrapped her arms around Huyen, and Huyen gently pulled her daughter into her embrace. Not long after, mother and daughter fell asleep, their faces peaceful after a long day. De sat beside them watching for a while, then gently pulled the blanket over both of them. Outside, the night had fallen over the countryside. In the small house, only the flickering oil lamp light and the steady breathing of Huyen and Micah remained. A peaceful day finally came to an end. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Apos, mother and child, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.